So we did use these files to make videos for sure, although I never showed anything publicly. But this is like the pièce de résistance. If you're a cult theorist, if you're a Maury Terry fan, this is the page. This and the next page that I'm going to show you.
All right, we are joined again by Manny Grossman. It has been a minute. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Eric. It certainly has been a minute, and
All
how
right.
you doing?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it has. Now, you reached out to me and said, hey, you have some updates about David Berkowitz, aka Son of Sam. So what's going on?
I have some very, very important updates for the audience. Of course, I think our last show we did Alfred Hunt Howell. It's been a while since we did Son of Sam, and I'm pretty sure the last time we did Son of Sam, I was already pretty much solidly off of the cult theory train, Maury Terry's cult theory, which really was the sort of like the way that most people thought about these crimes, if they thought about them at all. They thought of them through the lens that Berkowitz had accomplices, that he was working with the Carr brothers, and so on and so forth. So we had already sort of demolished those theories. But there's been some major updates since then, and I wanted to sort of clue your audience in, because finally Berkowitz has come clean. This is the first update that we have, and this is a major um, sort of a major revelation in a sense, because finally, to an author named Mike Caparelli, PhD, spiritual counselor. This is an interesting guy, and I hope he can come on your show one day. I did tell him about you, and I hope you guys can hook up. This is a guy who interviewed Berkowitz for 100 hours. He sat with him for over 30 sessions, and he did it with the not with the goal of figuring out the crimes and figuring out who did what and if he acted alone. It was mainly came at it from the religious angle. This guy's a pastor. He spoke to Berkowitz on that level of, I'm a Christian, you're a Christian. Let's discuss these crimes through that lens. And in that regard, the book is interesting. But what is the most interesting for me, of course, as a person who is interested in the crimes and whether this whole cult theory is true, this guy Caparelli has done a yeoman's service. He finally got Berkowitz to admit that he did all the shootings. This book just came out this past October, and furthermore, he goes the extra step of saying that he lied in the 1990s interviews. No, those are those famous interviews with Maury Terry, where Maury was leading the witness, where he was giving it, he said that he felt so much pressure from certain entities, he was in heavy denial. So it's very interesting that this came out after, the work that we've been doing. And of course, Caparelli was working on his own sort of separate track from this, but we've come together on this, and Caparelli's an interesting guy, and this is just a major thing, because finally out of the horse's mouth, you have him saying that he lied to Maury Terry in these famous interviews. So I thought that was an interesting thing to update your audience on. One of 4 updates we have, because I was under non-disclosure agreement for years. I was given access to tons of Maury Terry's personal files back in 2021. I had them all throughout the times that I was talking with you. I had them all throughout my video series, but I couldn't discuss any of them because I was under non-disclosure agreement, which I was following to a certain extent. I wasn't talking about these things publicly, for sure, and I was certainly not sharing the material publicly. But I have to admit, Eric, and I did share some of these files with people who were working with me, various people on my research team, and we use them as background. We use them to get information that then we could go out and make these videos that were sort of blowing away the whole Maury Terry thesis and really making a big splash in the Son of Sam world. And over time, people come, people go, and one of my ex partners in this, he decided that he was going to try to screw me over by releasing these files that I had given him that were supposedly secret to my, quote, enemies. I mean, Eric, this thing is so stupid. It's so dumb
Hmm.
in true crime world, especially the Son of Sam world. So there was this big drama going around for a few weeks where people who were all into the process theory and the cult theory were threatening to release them. So finally, I just said, F it. I'm going to just take the hit. If I get sued, so be it. And I released the files publicly with great fanfare
Hmm.
about a month ago. And they've changed the game completely. I mean, we have now, well, we have the actual list, Eric, of all of the people who were in Maury Terry's so-called Son of Sam cult. And of course, remember, have to remember that Berkowitz said that he was lying throughout the entire
Hmm.
1990s interview. And of course, we see that this date here, I, David Berkowitz, hereby acknowledge that all of the following individuals were involved. And this is directly in that time period that he's talking about. He's lying. So,
Yeah. So
do you have a
just so I
question?
get it straight, you essentially had the Maury Terry personal files, and I'm guessing you use them with the knowledge to go find evidence or something that would match up with them that you could release, kind of like a cop who might have a snitch or some evidence that's, shall we say, shaky, but they know that such and such went down, so let's go find something that we can actually put forth as evidence. Is that what you were doing?
Absolutely. We had so many local names from Yonkers that what we did was we just started trying to find these people, and they were shocked that we found some of them. I did some videos with some of the people that we found from these files. One in particular was a kid who had witnessed, robed, hooded cultists in Untermeyer Park. But this was, of course, in the '80s, way after Berkowitz was even arrested. So we did use these files to make videos for sure, although I never showed anything publicly. But this is like the pièce de résistance. If you're a cult theorist, if you're a Maury Terry fan, this is the page. This and the next page that I'm going to show you are the ones that you wanted to see. Now, what this is a front page letter from Berkowitz, and
Sure.
I'm doing this slowly so people can screenshot if they want it. We're not going to read it.
Right.
There's no point in reading all this. But what this is a letter that Berkowitz signed that was written by most likely by Maury Terry. That this is the absolute truth. These are the people who were involved with him in these crimes. It says, of course, that some of it is hearsay. But we won't, Maury Terry never worried about hearsay as in terms of, and here we have that they're all partying in Connecticut and Long Island, and weapons were involved, and child pornography, and all this stuff that, Maury Terry seemed to be obsessed with. But was signed by Berkowitz and witnessed by Maury Terry. And that's it. Those are the only
Mm.
signatories to this entire thing, Berkowitz and Maury Terry. And of course, I represent this list as accurate and true. And so here's the list. Always, of course, remembering that Berkowitz was lying in those 1990s interviews. So here's the list, Eric, of the 22 disciples of hell. Now, the first thing, of course, you and your audience will notice is that there's close to 80 names on here. Okay. Some of whom don't even have last names. So Berkowitz, presumably in 1996, is supposed to remember a Ken from the process in Untermeyer Park in 1976. So he's supposed to remember these people's names 20 years later. And quite a few of these people we've already debunked just by speaking to people in Yonkers and looking at the actual forensic evidence. John Carr, Michael Carr, and Wheat Carr had nothing whatsoever to do with any of this. Wheat Carr, in fact, some of the work I've been doing recently, she was the hero of Son of Sam. Actually, she was one of the people who
Mm.
helped capture this guy. So I don't even know why she's on this list. We've debunked this guy. We've debunked Richard Sparazza. There's Maury Terry in his files, Eric, had actual police reports where the police said that they interviewed this guy right here the day after the arrest, both Yonkers Police Department and New York Police Department, and they found nothing at all. This guy worked with Berkowitz and they
Mm.
used to carpool together. They found nothing at all, but somehow or other he's on the list. This guy, Maury, puts him in, said that he lived in Berkowitz's building, and drove the famous yellow Volkswagen. Well, not only have I debunked that whole yellow Volkswagen business, but this guy, I have a police report. He did not live in Berkowitz's building. His mother lived in Berkowitz's building, and every now and then he'd visit her, and he through those visits, he would come across Berkowitz sometimes, and they would say hello. That was the extent of their relationship. This guy I spoke to, I actually have an interview with his nephew on my channel. I just posted it a couple weeks ago, where they absolutely emphatically deny they had anything whatsoever to do with any of this. They had no idea that their name was even on this list. They were shocked.
And now Berkowitz is saying
This
that
guy,
it's all BS too. So ironically,
he's saying he's saying it's complete bullshit, complete BS.
Roy Cohen,
And
the Roy Cohen,
you know, the the Roy Cohn was involved with
okay,
David Berkowitz, according to Maury Terry. This guy right here was one of the mayor's aides at the time, Mayor Beam. This guy was Mayor Beam's Mayor Beam's son. This lady went to high school with Berkowitz. I mean, it's just, this guy worked for the Yonkers Police Department. You know, I showed this list 2 years ago to the Yonkers Police Department. I had a meeting with actually quite the top brass of the Yonkers PD. They were very interested in this. And they took one look at this list, Eric, and they just laughed me out of the room. They all knew this guy from the old days. And they were like, this guy's on this list. He's one of the most honest, forthright, best cops we ever had. So they just took this list and they basically, you know, kind of ripped it up and laughed me out of the room politely. But how do you use this as actionable evidence is the question that I have for anybody who's looking to prove the cult theory. Row, right? Hands. Like, how is this actionable evidence? And that's been my thing. Like, we need to prove this in a court of law if you're really gonna go down this route of thinking that Berkowitz had help. How do we get the cross-eyed sisters on a stand, right? How do we get Sunshine, a female from the Bronx, on the stand? So you can see how sloppy this is. This guy we totally debunked. We've had 4 or 5 shows with his friends that were all worked with him on the police department. He was another Yonkers cop. They're in shock that his name is on this list. All of these people here were either like names that were given to Maury Terry in the 90s by another equal lunatic by the name of Detective Jim Rothstein, or these were people he went to high school with. This woman here, where is he? Susan Conway, right? That was like basically a high school classmate of Maury Terry. He never even left his neighborhood hardly to accuse some of these people of being involved in murder. So this is a joke, and it needs to be treated as a joke. And the reason why I'm so confident is because I've already proven Berkowitz worked alone. We don't obviously need to go through all of this on this show. People can watch my channel, but you know, then once you look at this through the lens of like having already proven it was all BS, this is actually comedy. This is Maury Terry's famous Mr. Real Estate, the guy he said that was the head of the entire thing right here, James Donovan. The guy doesn't exist. I mean, the guy is a ghost. No one has ever been able to even prove that the guy even lived.
or Junior.
So, you know, and his junior, right, his son and his wife, they were all involved. These were the 3 people who planned Son of Sam in their Westchester mansion. And Berkowitz was supposed to be there as well as this guy here. Right, exactly. Richie Sperrazza was supposed to be there as well. So you have all of these high-level bankers, real estate people hanging out with David Berkowitz from Co-op City. It's just beggars belief. It's just beyond the realm of any reality we could possibly have. So I just wanted to show this to people because this is the pièce de résistance. If you're into the cult theory, this is the list you wanted to see for the last 50 years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go slowly up so people can screenshot it if they want. And I welcome anybody to take anyone on this list and try to connect them to David Berkowitz. I look forward to your work. I look forward to seeing it. And if you can actually do it with actionable evidence, get in touch and we'll have you on the show. So, any questions, Eric, before
No,
I
no,
carry
it
on
seems
with our
pretty
presentation?
cleanly put together.
Cool. Well, not only did it turn out that Berkowitz said that he was lying in the 1990s interviews, but he added this extra line here. I felt so much pressure from certain entities, I was in heavy denial. So that's
Mhm.
an interesting line to me. Pressure from certain entities. Well, what was this pressure and who were these entities? And so one thing that I've had for 3 years now, which no one has ever had, is I have about, I don't know, 100, letters between Berkowitz and Maury Terry,
Really?
spanning from 1980 to about from 1980 to
Hmm.
1997 or so. And they were just made public. Everybody can download this stuff if you just go to the People versus David Berkowitz. What happened was I released this stuff in violation of the NDA, and then all of a sudden the next day, it was crazy. The next day, all of a sudden, all of the stuff that I released ended up in organized
Hmm.
form on this website. So they were clearly watching what I was doing and responding to it. So now all this stuff is public. It's no longer under NDA. I'm no longer worried about a lawsuit or any of that stuff. I don't think anybody has the stomach or the money or the time or the energy to deal with lawsuits over really Maury Terry's shit stained garbage. Excuse my language. So, the question that I had, of course, was when I read this was, wait, I want to relate this to Maury Terry's letters because there's some interesting things in the letters between Berkowitz and Maury Terry, two of which I found, which I think are the most stark. Maury Terry, dear
Hmm.
Maury, and this is 1993, the same period where he's talking about lying and feeling pressure. Maury, thank you so very much for this super neat typewriter. Thus far, all I've been able to do is figure out how to plug it in and just do the basic stuff. I had no problem getting it in. See, someone does like me, and yes, there really is a God. I'm going to be mailing you a large envelope come Monday as soon as I locate a large envelope. I want to send you some of my overseas correspondence and some other pertinent paperwork. I'll get the hang of this yet. Take Cray, Maurice, and thank you for everything. I can't wait to show off my new machine to Lee. She'll be so happy. God bless you and glad to help you with your project.
Who's Lee?
I don't know who Lee is, but Berkowitz is one of these born
Mhm.
again Christians, and he's obsessed with like being a Christian, and his whole deal is like he has these networks of Christian ministries and prison Christians and all this stuff that he actually has quite an extensive
Okay.
social network. So from this, what I'm seeing here and what I'm gleaning from this, although this is just conjecture, I have no proof. Whereas we have proof that Berkowitz was being bought a typewriter by Maury Terry. I'm making the accusation that Maury was also helping with Berkowitz's wider social network. So a lot of people were dependent on Maury's largesse, which I think is where that pressure came to tell the lies. And here he is joking with his best friend Maury. Oh, one last thing. They're looking for you in the visiting room. Just after you guys left, a guy came in from the Keebler Food Company asking who purchased all their pizza chips. I think I may have gotten you a 1 minute spot on TV, a
Hmm.
Keebler commercial. Best regards, bro. David. So, what do you think about that before I
I
show you
mean,
the next letter?
it's not conclusive. I mean, technically, Maury could have given him a typewriter because he had a connection in one of his businesses or whatever. Not necessarily a
Mm-hmm.
bribe, don't know. The Keebler question makes me think that Maury might have been spreading the love when visiting. Not necessarily, again, a bad thing. He could have bought snacks for everybody, like, hey, here's something for the guard. Here's this. Here, give this to your cellmate. Give that, whatever. Just spreading the love around. So I don't know for sure if that's actually bribing or paying him off, but
Right.
cool.
Well, let's take a look at the next letter. Maury, the total order for the toys and coloring books, crayons comes to 51.50. You'll have to add about $8 for freight. Thanks, bro. May the good Lord bless you. I'll call you soon. Yours truly, David. And these are the only two letters I picked.
Fair
I
enough.
could have picked
But
20
that could
more
have
were
also
were
been
Yeah, yeah,
donating.
yeah.
Hey, Maury, the children need something for Christmas. Can you donate? My natural inclination is I'm always going to say, yeah, it's nothing, unless there can be enough built up to
Right.
where it is. It's interesting, but
Right. Well, I just
Sure.
showed these 2 examples, and of course, you're correct in, being a little skeptical because
Mhm.
these are the only 2 you're seeing. But I suggest, for anyone who's interested in this particular topic even more, the letters are downloadable. You can go and get them all. There's probably about 200 of them. He Berkowitz talks about how much he appreciates Maury Terry helping
Mhm.
out his father, helping out this person, helping that person. So there's a record, in my opinion, and I encourage people to go study this stuff, of something hinky going on involving finances and favors
I
between
don't think
Maury
it's that
Terry and
uncommon
David
though.
Berkowitz.
Honestly, especially because, like, remember, David Berkowitz could not profit directly from his story. And Maury Terry obviously is making good money off of his book. And the more he could get out of David Berkowitz, the better. So I have a feeling this kind of quid pro quo might go on between authors and subjects over time, like, you know, greasing the wheel.
But then that
Sure.
raises the question is right, but yeah, but then is that ethical? If you're in a sense helping someone out, doesn't that then raise the question of like, is this person telling you what you
I don't
want to
know. It
know?
depends. And, technically speaking, if, let's say you're interviewing somebody who was a victim of something, right? And you know that they
Mhm.
don't have any money, they don't have, you know, food for Thanksgiving, they don't have, you can be generous to a person, and it's not necessarily sketchy. Just to, you know what, I feel bad for them. I'm making all this money off of them, and let me go ahead and donate to the kids. Let me do this, do that. Now, I I I have issues with Maury Terry. I'm the one who said that I didn't like the way he
Mhm.
interviewed Berkowitz, and I pretty much moved on.
Right,
I mean, the
definitely.
second I saw that, I said he was full of shit and moved on.
Right.
But I'm lazy.
Right,
I just
totally.
was like,
Yeah.
I looked at that. I said, okay, well, that interview, he's pushing every answer in there. That means that it's completely suspect. So
Right. Well, listen, I'm in a sense I'm jealous because I wish I had moved on because I spent the last 30 years of my life with this with this stuff obsessing over it. But you bring up valid points and I would say that I could agree with you in certain circumstances, but then I got to remember what he said here. I lied in that 1990s interview. I felt so much pressure. So we have to deal with that. And I think I might have figured it out, but hey, maybe the jury's still open as to what that pressure was. But I just thought that this was an interesting little development.
did he tell Mike
And,
what the pressure
let,
was? Okay.
no,
So
he did
and
not.
that's the
He did
and
not.
that's the other issues.
Or if he did, it's not I'm sorry. If he did,
Oh,
it's
no
not in the
problem.
book. I
But
apologize for
therein is the
cutting you off.
problem because it's vague. Pressure from certain circles, whatever it is. It could be people saying, "Hey, Maury's buying us Christmas presents. Stop doing that." Maybe it could be other prisoners saying, "You don't tell them that. You're going to get into." There's so many possibilities, especially with a sketchy cat like that. Uh, just sorry.
Exactly. So yeah, so it's definitely open for debate. I just think that when you have an author and a subject who have, and especially when that subject is a mass murderer like Berkowitz, I just think it's odd that Berkowitz would send the author, a card like this. If I could just make one wish from Yonkers, we'd be together
Hmm.
now. Dear Maury, I can't make it to Yonkers right now, so make sure you get up here. It's almost time to eat Miller's once again. I'm getting
Hmm.
bored with the Concord. Yours truly, David. Right? So I don't know, it just seems to be, and look at the date, right?
I
The
understand,
90s,
but
that
I
this
mean,
critical period.
he's in prison, dude. He's bored. It's like, come visit me, man. Bring me a snack. Do whatever. I mean, he's literally
All right. Well,
held captive. I mean, so I'm just
true. True, but listen, when it comes to money and gifts, you gotta look at that. You gotta
well, go
raise the
look
stink
and
eye a little
explore. No,
bit. But
I encourage it highly.
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
always of the mindset again. If I can dismiss it, I'm just going to until I can't dismiss it any longer.
Hmm.
It's just to me a
Fair.
stronger way to go and not get into trouble with speculation. And
Right.
that's it. I mean, but here, I'll
Right.
freely speculate that I can imagine anybody. You might have card. Do you have cards like this to other people besides Maury? He might. We might. I mean, he's probably lonely. I mean, anybody come visit
Um,
me. Oh, yeah,
well, he was an
okay.
extensive letter writer. I mean, he had pen pals all over the world. So, are there other letters like this? I have no doubt there are. But this is the guy who's writing his book and who needs his story,
Hmm.
who needs a story to sell, which wasn't true because forensically, it's just not true. It just does not come out in the real world that Berkowitz had any sort of accomplices or help. But all right, listen, what I'm going to do, Eric, is you've challenged me. I feel good about it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series on these letters. And, I'm going to do an extensive deep dive into all 200 odd letters. And maybe,
Maybe.
maybe I'll change your
Where did
mind
you get
by the
them?
end of that. These were all part of Maury Terry's personal tranche that I've had for several years now, but
No,
which
I'm
were
saying,
not
where
made
did you
public.
wind up with? It's like, oh, by the way, I just happened to stumble into his personal papers. Or can you reveal the source?
I was given access to the files. I don't want to say who. It was a person who was working with Maury
Mm,
Terry extensively in 2021 for a production, who allowed me and how many people went with me? Three other Son of Sam researchers to go up to their house in Connecticut and where all of Maury
okay.
Terry's files were, and we got the most important stuff. We were told I went up there with Carl Denaro too, who told me he had been working with Maury for like 40 years by that point. He told me straight up. He said, "Let's just get the typewritten stuff. Get the typewritten stuff because Maury told me that was always the most important." It's odd Maury never showed his friend
Mhm.
Carl Denaro any of this stuff. Maury Terry had to die, and then Carl had to get access through this whole mishigas of going up there and getting access and signing the NDA and all that. But yeah, we've had this stuff since June of 2021, and I've been studying it extensively, which was one of the reasons why I've been so
Mhm.
confident in my findings that Berkowitz acted alone. Now we have this last topic, which actually brings up another sort of ethical issue with regards to Maury Terry and the way he gathered information. And it turns out that one of his main informants was mm-mm, right. And this is disgusting, actually, because Maury Terry rests a lot of the findings of his book. He rests a lot of the conclusions on his book on these two composite characters that he names Vinny and Danny in his book. Supposedly, they're in touch with Berkowitz and they're intimate with Berkowitz. And I want to read this just because it's not that long and it sets us up for the important stuff. So these prisoners and one prime outside contact provided important information about the case. All knew Berkowitz well. To each, Berkowitz revealed intimate details, particulars which overlapped and were repeated to us by the informants who were with Berkowitz during time periods ranging from 79 to 85. To protect these sources, who may someday be asked to testify in a court of law and whose lives may be in jeopardy, the information they provided will be attributed here to two composite characters whom I will call Vinny and Danny. The real names and letters or statements from each of them are in the possession of the Queen's District Attorney, who developed two of them. Others were cultivated by me. So there's a lot in these two paragraphs. This is
So, how many people are we actually talking about?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't even know if any of these people really existed. I question everything in Maury Terry's book, but one of them definitely did. A guy named Danny. But this just shows you how important this information gleaned from these informants was to Maury's thesis. Prime contact, important information. All knew him well. All Berkowitz revealed intimate details to them to protect these sources whose
Mhm.
lives may be in jeopardy, right? Like, so these are important people to Maury Terry. Well, we have figured out who Danny is because these letters are in Maury Terry's files as well. So it turns out that Danny was an inmate by the name of Alexander Verone. who wrote this letter to Maury Terry in 1995 or 1996. I can't quite make out that. I think
Okay.
it might be 95. I can't quite make that out. But the letters aren't important. What's important is that Maury Terry, who was getting this so-called inside intel from this guy, this is him. He is a predicate serial child
Mhm.
rapist who had escaped parole in the 90s, who had skipped parole and was looking for a favorable parole hearing during this time period that he's helping out Maury Terry. So this is this guy. He's majorly a sick felon. I mean, this is a major.
Mhm.
He has like 18 counts of
Stop
rape
saying,
against him.
yeah,
Female,
yeah.
9 years old. Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I didn't
You're a
realize. Sorry,
YouTuber, right?
I didn't realize that was.
You know, that gets
Yeah, but
channels
I don't know.
nuked.
I've been saying
But
it on my channel, so
that's fine.
I apologize. You can edit that out, and I'll stop saying the word. I just getting ahead of myself. So this guy is doing all this nasty, spiritually sick stuff. He's doing it with knives. This is him. This is who Maury Terry got the bulk of his massive information out about this cult thesis. This is whose words any Maury Terry fan who has been resting on the last 20, 30 some odd years. This sick individual right here. And here's, of course, his rap sheet, which, we don't have to go through every
Expensive.
every line of. Right, exactly. And he's an ex-nursing student. We have him here. This is 1978. Your audience can just read this themselves here, what I'm trying to underline. This is a sick guy. This is a guy. Oh, sorry. This is 1976. The charges were dropped in Yonkers against him because a 12-year-old girl failed to show up for the meeting. Here's 1995. He's returning to face more charges, parole violation hearing next week. So in 1995, when he's sending Maury Terry letters about this crime, he's, I don't know. I think the timing between 1995 and him seeking some sort of
Sure.
parole I think there's something there. And what I find very interesting, and I'm going to be revealing this tonight on my show. I'm doing a show on this a little later this evening. This guy went to high school with Maury Terry. We just found that out yesterday. He graduated Sacred Heart High School in 1966. Maury Terry graduated Sacred Heart High School in 1964. It was a very, very small high school. Each graduating class probably had 20, 30 people in it at the most. So I'm not saying they had to, but it seems like Maury Terry had a relationship with this guy that could have potentially went back to their teenage years. And then that brings up the whole other issue of why is he talking with there's something wrong here, in my opinion, and I would very much like to hear your thoughts.
I mean, if the high
this.
school's that small, again, that doesn't mean that they're friends, etc., but the odds are pretty high that they crossed paths with each other. If they're both there at the same time, there's only 80 people. If you add all the grades together,
right,
it's very likely that they
roughly
knew of each other. I don't know. Without reading his letter to Maury and the way he addressed him, things like that, it could be a statement analysis thing.
It's very informal. He's calling Maury Terry his cousin. He's saying, "Hey,
Okay,
cugino
so then that
mio,
implies more of a relationship than just dear Mr. Terry, I wanted to inform you type of letter. And that's, like I said, I'd have to see how that is. It's hard for me to speculate on that, but you could pull a lot about the vernacular, how they spoke, or how he spoke to Maury Terry, what was going on. And yeah, it bears researching. Now, I'm being a pain in your ass today, but I will say that because he's a creep doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't make a truthful statement about something else. I obviously wouldn't, ask him to care for anybody I know or be around me in any way. But I always have to leave that out there and acknowledge to say that
open.
he could be a creep, and he could have seen something or saw something or
Truthful and
did something, whatever.
right, exactly. But I just find it odd that Maury Terry in his book, he talks about he's recounting a conversation he had with some other law with a law enforcement official, and he's talking about the Westchester child
Hmm.
artist, and he's talking about this guy, Alexander Verone, because he's talking about his case. Oh, this guy was responsible for 14 or
Hmm.
18 cases. But then in that same paragraph, he blames it on John Carr because of what's in one of the Son of Sam letters about how John Carr was a arist and
Hmm.
suffocator of young girls, which was just we have found was just Berkowitz just wigging out. He didn't know this guy John Carr. He was calling Sam a demon from hell who was murdering everybody around him. He was saying that Wheat was this. I mean, he was saying that John was that. And so I just found it gross that Maury Terry fobs off this guy's crimes on John Carr in The Ultimate Evil. I thought that that was highly unethical and makes me think that he has a
Hmm.
relationship with this guy, and that's deeper than just informant,
It does make you
informer type
wonder.
of thing,
Maury
informee.
seemed like a very odd character in in many ways.
Yes.
I don't want to make any further implications on his character other than his scholarly pursuits, which I don't think are great. But
Right.
yeah, he has some interesting relationships, and it that may be why he had some bad blood with the cops too, because I got the impression the cops didn't like him a bit.
No, in fact, I just did a show where he wrote a 4-page report to the Yonkers Police Department, updating them on the status of the Son of Sam case with all the cult BS that he had thrown in there, and he did not hesitate in these 4 pages to call the cops corrupt, say they didn't know what they were doing. He was trying to tell them how to do investigations. He was saying you'll this is how you're supposed to investigate this. So he had this weird
Mhm.
antagonistic relationship with all law enforcement, it seemed, and it certainly didn't help him at all because they thought he was a crackpot. I mean, that's basically the long and short of it. And of course, now we know why they thought he was a crackpot, because we have all his files. Like, I can compare what he wrote in The Ultimate Evil to the actual
Mhm.
police detective report, and in 99.9% of the cases, we're finding him completely manipulating the police report to juice it in such a way to comport with his pre-planned theory. But he's
Mhm.
having to manipulate. He's not straight reporting. So I just thought that these were sort of interesting little tidbits to
Definitely.
update your audience with. If Of course, if they're interested in much more detail than I could ever go into here, they should go to the Grossman Files on YouTube. I have now up to about 180 live streams on this stuff, where we get into the real granular details and really the weeds with all of this. But Eric, I just kind of wanted to see what you thought about all this and bring your audience up to speed with where we've been at with Son of Sam the last year or so. And I think that this is, interesting. I think that this could be potential indictments on Maury Terry and his work, and that's kind of been where I'm at, because I don't like being lied to. I don't like people taking me for a sucker. So I'm the kind of person that's going to find out where and when I've been lied to, and hopefully accurately report it to the audience. And that's all I have to say
Awesome,
for
man, and I
today, my
hope you
friend.
do come back when when you have more or whatever it is, and I enjoy being a foil, so to speak, on some of this, I guess.
I enjoy it too, because listen, I never get challenges on this stuff. What I get is a lot of people saying that I'm a Fed, or that I'm in a satanic cult member, or that my father was Operation
Hmm.
Mockingbird, or that my tattoo somehow means I'm a devil worshiper. Those are the kind of attacks and counter arguments I get. So I always appreciate when someone pushes back on me with actually intelligent and reasoned questions, because You are correct about some of the things that you said, and my hope is that the expansion of details that I do on my shows on my channel will help to clarify for your audience why I believe that Maury Terry just made this up lock, stock, and barrel, and for whatever reason, I have no clue. But it doesn't change the issue for me that we were lied to extensively by this guy, and I'm trying to right this historical
Awesome. Well,
wrong.
dude, thank you so much.